by now, we're probably all familiar with the very popular Teddy Roosevelt quote about like being the man in the arena. And I don't know if you guys are anything like me and Nick, but whenever we hear that, we're like, we get all hyped up.
I get
we're like,
super fired up.
Be the man in the arena. And it's real easy to skip over the part of that quote that says like, what is it? There's no effort without
error and shortcoming.
Yeah. So we have
put in effort.
We have erred.
And we have erred.
And we have come up short. And we have experienced failure. So that's what we said. There's no risk of being among the timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.
Yeah.
Because we know defeat.
We have experienced defeat.
So here we are talking about the 5 lessons that we have learned from our defeat and how those are shaping the way that we do our life visioning process moving forward.
Totally. Yeah, it reminds me, the other quote that I wanted to mention before we get into this is the quote, we do it not because it's easy, but because we thought it would be easy.
So true.
It's
so
like,
true.
Yeah. So back to your point, over the last few years, we've moved from Alabama to Knoxville, and now we're moving back from Knoxville to Alabama.
Yeah, I feel like I've got to look at my notes down here because I feel like we need to put some dates to this for it to be like meaningful. So we previously lived in Alabama.
Yep.
From
November 2020.
Okay. To early 2022.
Yes. So about a year and a half.
And then I should be able to like recall that I lived this. This was my life. And I can't tell you what happened. And then we moved to Tennessee in 2022.
Yep.
And then we bought this like mixed use commercial building.
July 2022.
Yeah. And the plan was that we were going to renovate that building and run it as like office space and co-working and then
short-term rental,
Airbnb rentals upstairs. But we were living in one and during this period.
Yeah. Yep.
So here we are.
Here we are.
3 years later. And we are selling that building and we are moving back to Alabama.
I mean, basically it's been a 5-year journey. A house in Alabama, building in Tennessee, and now we're back trying to find something here.
Yeah, because our house in Alabama was a real fixer-upper project too. So we rolled from that into major projects on the building.
Yep.
And it just has felt like a whirlwind. And especially in the time that we have been in Knoxville, I think, so like the past 3 years, I think we both feel like we've aged like a decade.
A ton.
Yeah.
And I look like it.
You just got the gray in your beard to show some experience. That's all.
That evidently, yeah, we can call it that. But on a serious note, yeah. So if you're listening to this, you're watching this, and you're not familiar, we have a visioning process. We have a whole video on it. We're not going to cover it in this video. You can, check out that video or podcast in the link below. But basically, we regularly vision and plan our life, and we have a process for that. And we wanted to share, because our vision has changed a lot over the last 5 years as we've navigated life. Now we want to kind of share, well, what are the learnings, what are the takeaways for the way that we think about planning and visioning in light of the last few years is really the big idea behind this episode.
So the first thing that we have come to appreciate more than ever is that if you do not know your foundational beliefs and what your vision is built on, your vision will just absolutely crumble when things don't unfold the way that you think they were going to.
Totally. Yeah, it always reminds me of like the Mike Tyson quote where he says, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah, I mean, totally.
It's like, yeah, we have gotten punched in the mouth a few times in the last few years. And I don't know that our marriage would have made it through. I don't know that us personally, I think we would have broken in a lot of ways if we didn't
At the very least, this season would have been very damaging to us.
Totally, 100%.
But because we know our foundational beliefs, and that's like at the core of everything, I think we're coming out of this season even stronger than we went into it.
Totally agree.
And I'm so thankful. Like God has been so faithful through this season. And even though it's been tumultuous, I feel like, man, consider it all joy, when you encounter various trials, like we have just experienced that. And I'm just really thankful.
Well, I think what's interesting, so the quote, right, from James that you're saying here, consider it all joy when you encounter various trials. When I think about this first learning, like part of it is this acceptance that you're going through a trial, or acceptance that what you thought was going to happen or the vision that you had didn't work out. When we moved here to Alabama, and we bought a fixer-upper, and then a year and a half later, we're thinking we need to sell and move to Tennessee. That was really hard for us to come to terms with the failure that we thought we were experiencing because our visioning wasn't working out, at least the way we thought.
Yeah, like maybe death of a dream would be a better way of phrasing it.
Not the right word.
Yeah.
But then Knoxville, same idea, right? So we had these dreams and visions for what we thought Knoxville was going to be. And so we moved to Knoxville. We bought this building. We had these grand visions of what we were hoping for. And it became clear in specifically early 2024, so a little over a year ago, that the dream and the vision that we had was not going to play out the way that we hoped. And so you've got to like accept that to a certain extent. And when you accept that you just got punched in the mouth and this didn't work out, the only thing you have to fall back on are whatever your core beliefs are, like whatever is at your foundation in terms of the way that you see the world.
Yeah. I mean, the decision to leave Alabama in 2022 was hard for a lot of reasons, not the least of which was just like the amazing mortgage interest rate that we had on that house.
Yeah, it was a 2.9%.
Yeah, and we had put a ton of work into that house. We still had a lot of work to go to get it where we wanted to get it. But yeah, it was hard to walk away from that. And then the decision to leave Knoxville has been even harder in some ways. And truly, like the fear of looking like complete idiots moving back and forth and just the instability of like repeatedly things not working out how we expected them to. I think it just would have paralyzed us from moving forward.
Totally.
If we weren't firmly rooted in God's word.
Yeah.
And that really is like what has helped us through this. And so we just come back to again and again, like if somebody's trying to budget and, you know, work through their money stuff, but they don't know fundamentally like what they believe about the world. And, you know, you start trying to make a plan for how you're going to do this and how you're going to do that. And then life throws you curveballs. If you don't have that foundation to fall back on, I mean, why would you pick up the pieces and then move forward?
Totally.
And why and how?
I see it with clients all the time. They'll ask me questions like, well, should I, pay down debt or invest? Or should I do this, which might make me more money? Or should I change jobs and do this? Or should we move here? Like, what do I think? And we talk through these big life decisions, but I literally cannot help them unless I know what they believe about certain almost fundamental things. So it's like, especially with some of the bigger questions, it becomes like what do you believe is your purpose? Like when you get to the end of your life and you look back on how you lived and the decisions you made, the time you spent and the money you spent, what do you want to look back and see? And we need to know the answer to that question before we can even vision, and certainly before we can talk about spending your money.
Yeah.
And it sounds funny because a lot of people will work with me and they're like, I just need help budgeting, man. And it's like, yeah, but what's the point of budgeting if we don't know what you believe and what you want out of life? And so for us, I think we're going to talk about this more in point, like I think our fourth point later on, but when I think about our first learning and the importance of this foundational belief, I think especially for me, because I sort of, I teach people how to budget manage their money for a living. I help people vision and life plan for a living. I'm in the process of pursuing my financial planning license. Like I certainly am trying to position myself as some sort of financial coach, expert, person. And it seems from the outside that we could be very wishy-washy with our life. Like, oh, we bought this house, then we sold it. Then we moved to Tennessee, bought this building, and we're going to renovate it, make it this big real estate investment. Now we're selling that. Now we're moving back and like, it feels like, whoa, I don't know that I want to take advice from this guy. And it's like, yeah, I understand that. And I think that I could have let that paralyze me and been like, no, we're going to stay and make this work anyways and really fight it, rather than just accepting that, hey, sometimes when you take swings, you miss. And like sometimes when you're in the arena, you do error and you do come up short and you get punched in the face. And now we have to accept that and go back to the drawing board. And it's in those moments that like what you believe to be true about your identity and what you care about and what your purpose is, all of that stuff, if you don't have that kind of dialed in, that's when you're gonna flounder.
Yeah. And all of your foundational beliefs filter down into your life priorities.
Totally. Yeah.
And so our second learning from all of this has been that not only do you have to know what your priorities are, be very clear on them, you have to assess to make sure that you're actually living in accordance with what you've said your priorities are. Because what we found is that we had one thing written down and would tell you one thing, but we were living very differently. And it took things going wrong and then zooming out to assess the situation. And then basically we found 2 key failure points.
Yeah. Tell me this is a dumb analogy. But like if you think about like a map that lays out the directions for a trip, and then 5 days in you realize you're not at your destination, but then we actually assess it and we go, dude, you didn't even follow the directions.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe the plan that you wrote down is actually okay. Maybe you just need to actually do the plan.
Yeah.
And like for us, the priorities that we had written down were close, but we needed to reorder them and clarify them.
I was about to say there was some clarity of language that needed to happen.
With the way that we did our priorities. And then we realized actually we're not even following the map, right? And so we need to actually live in accordance with these priorities, which means we now have to change some actions around the way that we're handling our day to day.
So I want to call out those like 2 key failure points, just so it doesn't feel like
we're talking super vague here.
Yeah. The first thing was that our actions were prioritizing outside relationships over our relationship with Christ and also over our relationship with each other.
Yeah.
And then the second kind of key failure was that we had taken on some relational responsibilities that were in conflict with what we said our priorities were.
Yeah. Let me just read out our priorities. So again, in our visioning process, part of the vision process is we have a priority section and we order them. And that the order is important.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, even when you come down to like, well, how much money am I going to spend on going out with friends versus going out with my spouse?
Totally.
Or, whatever. Your priorities are going to guide
that decision.
Yeah. Even though that seems like a minor decision in the moment, like how much am I going to spend going out to eat with coworkers?
Yep.
It really does help. It has like a very practical application.
Well, or even like if you're thinking about trying to make budget cuts and there's like expenses related to health, expenses related to your kids, expenses related to seeing extended family, expenses related to going out with your spouse, friends, hobbies, etc. And you're trying to cut, like understanding what your priorities are and the order that they're in can even help you then go to the budget and say, where do I maybe need to look at cutting first?
Totally.
So we have 8 of them, and these are just broad life priorities. The first is our relationship with Christ, and we also stay in that like both individually and together. And so that means that we are both individually seeking Christ, but then also we make time and prioritize time together doing our Bible study. Second is our marriage, and then also the friendship that we have in our marriage. And that's important for us because we try to make it a point in our marriage that we are both spouse and we are both friends, and we want to prioritize things that way.
I think I was just telling you earlier, I think it can get really easy to do like a weekly date night or something like that. And it's like you check the box of weekly date night, and then it's like, okay, I got that done. Now I can hang out with my friends.
Now I
these
can
other
go out
nights,
with these people I actually want to hang out with.
Yeah. And it's like, no, like if you're married, like you are my number one friend.
Yes.
And like you are my spouse and also my number one friend.
Yes.
And like I want us to invest in our relationship that way.
That's our belief and our priority.
Yeah.
And so it's like we need to build our life that way.
Totally.
And so the number 3 is going to be biblical stewardship of our time, our health, and our finances. 4 is our immediate family. And for us, that means it's me and Hannah and then future children. 5 is going to be building our business and wealth to support all of the other values and priorities that we have. 6 is fostering our interests and gifts that God has given us. 7 is healthy community. And so healthy community looks like church, extended family, and then friends. And then number 8 is we have it written down as living in a walkable area with immediate surroundings that we love. And I would just say broader than that, it's like taking a real interest in fostering the literal place that we live and the immediate surroundings of. And so one of the things that we've learned is we want it to be walkable and we want it to like draw us outside and those kinds of things. And so back to your 2 points, what we found over the last few years is our actions, even if we had them on paper, not this way, our actions were prioritizing some outside relationships over our marriage and over our relationship with Christ. And then we'd also taken on some responsibilities that were in conflict with allowing us to also prioritize the things that we say are our priority.
Yeah. And just as a side note, I want to mention, I think it can be really hard when you start writing these things down because, I mean, you can see from this list, like all of these are really important things.
Totally.
And it's hard to say that like one is over the other.
And it feels really weird to say that. And like, honestly, I expect that people watching and listening to this will listen to that list in that order and go like, oh, I definitely disagree with that.
Well, it's also, I mean, it has taken us a decade to get to this list.
Totally. Yeah. We have reordered it and reordered it and reordered it and added things and removed things many times.
Yeah. But we were talking, when you order your priorities correctly, the magic that happens is that the things that you've put up here in your priority list serve to improve the things that you've put down here.
Totally.
So like it all builds on each other. So when you prioritize your marriage over your kids, which a lot of people like, oof.
They flip that.
Yeah.
Yep.
But a lot of people like they
will push back hard on this.
Yes.
Yep.
It's like, but you're a better parent
yes.
when you invest in your marriage. And like your kids will thrive because your marriage is stronger.
Yep.
Like that is totally a good thing for them.
Yeah. Well, it's very much a putting your own oxygen mask on first before your neighbor. And in like a marriage and kid, I mean, it's putting on our oxygen mask on our marriage before the oxygen mask on the kids, right? It's that sort of idea. If you're dying and you're trying to help out your neighbor, but you can't breathe because you didn't have your oxygen mask on, you're not going to be very effective and very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a lot of people talk about, struggling to take time to like exercise or because they feel selfish. And it's like, that's not selfish. I mean, we totally
Certainly.
can.
You can go overboard
make
with it.
an idol out of these things.
You can make it that
and
way.
make them a selfish thing. But if done with healthy boundaries, then you being healthy only improves the relationship that you will have with anybody else.
Totally. You show up better. You show up more. Yeah, you're more effective, everything. And if you've not given a lot of, dedicated thought and time to what your foundational beliefs are and what your priorities are in the order that they're in, we've actually got a worksheet that's a PDF we'd love to send you. You can just click the link down below this episode and put in your email, and we'll send that over to you. And it'll help you kind of think through what your beliefs are and what your priorities are, and ultimately how that will end up affecting your budget and your money and all the other things that you have going on in your life.
So when you're going through the visioning process, it's important to think about the things that are within your control and the things that aren't within your control. And I would even say the decisions that are yours to make and the decisions that are not yours to make. And what we found in hindsight was our learning, our third one? Yeah. Our third learning was that our vision was very reliant on other people's decision making.
Yeah. And in order for our vision to work out, other people needed to make a decision one way or another.
Right.
And the big learning process for us has been when we create our visions going forward, we're very careful to not put expectations or certain things in the vision that we're only going to be happy with this vision if somebody else that's not me or you
makes Y decision.
Makes some decision that needs to happen for that to happen. And so like, I think after writing your vision, this is just part of our process now, like looking at it and going, okay, is there anything in here where somebody else has to make a decision for this to work out?
Yeah.
Because if so, we should probably rethink how we're thinking about this.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, will I still be happy with this decision and the way that I've handled this situation if fill in the blank person doesn't do what I think they should do or what I hope they will do.
Yeah. Or even like what you predict they might do.
Yeah.
Like that, like if you think about it as, it's kind of a weird way to think, but if you think about it like a game of poker and you're like playing and you're kind of guessing what you think the other person's going to do and then you're playing accordingly, it's like, man, with visioning, that just gets real tricky.
Yeah.
Like, to a certain extent, you almost want to just vision and try to vision in a way where you're not really worried too much about trying to anticipate what they're going to do.
Yeah. You know? So just an example of this, we were camping one weekend and it was this RV park where you can buy a lot and like build, guest structures and different things. They kind of got a whole community thing going on. And we met this couple who had bought a lot, kind of like spur of the moment. They were like, yeah, we had just come for the weekend. And then we saw this lot.
They
and
were
decided
like
to buy
newly
it.
retired, just got a camper, real jazzed up, fell in love with the park.
And they were so excited about it because they wanted their son and daughter-in-law and their other kids to come and vacation with them and stay in the little guest space that was on that RV lot. But they had owned it now at this point for 18 months, and they were just so disappointed because they were the only ones who had ever gone.
The son and the daughter-in-law and the kids.
And you could
never
tell, I mean, you could hear the disappointment in her voice. And she even said, like, yeah, we might should have slowed down and thought about it a little bit more.
Yeah.
And that's just such a great example because it's like, okay, I would love it if these people would come and use this thing with me. But if their life is busy and they can't do that or, whatever, will I still be happy with this if they're not going to come use it? And just being really honest with yourself about that. Because, I mean, I do it. I will dream up these ideal solutions or ideal, Norman Rockwell type situations that are going to happen. And it's like, you might need to
It's really tricky too because
evaluate.
I think people do this a lot with buying toys or
I think pools
or adding features to their house. So like house renovations where they're like, I'm going to add this extra thing so that the family can come visit, or we're going to add a pool and then the grandkids and everybody's definitely going to want to come hang out here, or we're going to get a boat and then everybody's going to want to go whatever. And buddy, it is, I mean, maybe, but like a lot of the time, the version of that you have in your head
probably
is not
reality.
Exactly going to be reality. And you're putting a lot of loaded expectations on this that may not be somebody else's vision or may not be somebody else's decision they want to make. And so just getting in the habit of going, okay, let's say that I add the pool and
it's just me and my book and my pool float.
It's just me and my...
Am I still thrilled to have this pool?
Am I pumped to have the pool? And if so, great, add the pool. But if you're only going to be happy with the decision if those people come regularly and use it, you just want to be very careful. And that's the trap we found ourselves in, and that's why it's one of the biggest learnings that we've had from the last few years.
And if you find yourself in a situation like this, like that RV couple that we mentioned, or like me and Nick, our fourth lesson is just reiterating that it is okay to change your mind.
Totally.
It is okay to look and go, the reasons that I made this decision have all become irrelevant now. And so I'm going to go back to the drawing board and reassess and make a new decision.
I love that too, because what you just said there, the information that I had of the reasons has become irrelevant, right? Like I've had a number of friends and a few clients that I'm close with who've asked me, like, do you regret moving to Knoxville, now that you're just moving back? And when I really think about it, I think we made the best decision that we could at the time with the information that we had. And if I had to do it over again, it's one of those things where it's like, sure, if I could go back in time and know everything I know, well, maybe I'd make a different decision. But if I look back, I think that there were a few things I would change about my decision-making process. But on the whole, I go, we made the best decision we could with the information that we had. I want to learn from those decisions going forward. But ultimately, I can't beat myself up about it. And I certainly am now not going to go, well, even though the reasoning I changed and the information that I had, I now found out is different, I'm not just going to stay in that decision. Mm-hmm. That's just going to exacerbate the problem.
Yeah. And I think just tying back into, what we talked about earlier, just like our beliefs, I think the other thing that has given us peace is all of these decisions were made very prayerfully and seeking God through his word.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we made the right decision, the wrong decision, a neutral decision, or, I don't know which one of those it was, but I have peace in the fact that we tried, we did our best to follow God and what we felt like he was calling us to do. And so I can rest easy knowing that if we got it wrong, he will totally redeem our mistakes. And that also he can he can course correct us. He can and will course correct us when we get it wrong. And I think, the big thing is that you don't just sit still and be paralyzed and never take action on anything.
Yeah.
You got to be the man in the arena.
A frame that I think is helpful, because I see it with clients a lot, and I think you and I could have easily done it, is what are you tying your identity to? And I think a lot of people are resistant to change when their vision isn't working out how they thought, because they've wrapped up their identity in the success of that specific vision.
Totally.
And so if it's a business that they started that isn't going as well as they hoped for, they kind of need to shut it down and do something different. Or if it's they move somewhere and they realize that they actually don't want to live there and they want to move somewhere else, or like whatever, people will just keep going down a certain path because they have tied in their identity and their almost like their value as a human to the success of this thing happen. And if they change, then they have to sort of admit that at least that aspect or the way they thought about that vision failed. And if you've tied your identity to that, that means you're a failure. And that means you're not a valuable person. That means you're worthless or meaningless or whatever.
And I just want to be very clear. We struggle with
all
of those thoughts.
We struggle with that.
But thankfully, we know what is true, and we know that those are not true thoughts.
Yep.
And so when we're struggling with those, we know where to go to find truth, and it's God's word.
Yeah.
But
that's literally
it's not that we don't have these thoughts and struggle with them. It's just that we know how to combat them.
It's the only way that we've been able to move through it and go, all right, well, now what?
Yeah.
Because we're going to change this.
Yeah.
And because we're not going to beat ourselves up ultimately for being failures in this or whatever. Like, this didn't work. Good thing I don't find my identity in this thing working. And I find my identity in Christ. And so, cool.
Yeah.
Let's create a new vision now
forward.
and we can go to go do something else.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's important that when you're changing directions and you're finding out, hey, this didn't work, we're going to do something different now. I think it's important to take time to make sure that you're learning from that, we're going to do a whole episode on some of the financial learnings that we've had from the last few years in this real estate investment. We're also going to do an episode about just broader life learnings. And one of the things I think of that came out of this, just a very practical one for us, is we don't like living in large towns or cities, and we don't even like really living in medium-sized cities. We like living in small cities and small towns.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's I know people listening who live in LA and New York think Knoxville is 200,000 people in Knox County. LA is 4 million, but Knoxville feels humongous to us.
Yeah.
And so it's no. We 20,000 people.
Yeah.
And even if we had stayed in Tennessee, because at the beginning of 2024, we didn't know that we were going to come back to Alabama. We were kind of going to explore a lot of things. And that's kind of what 2024 ended up being, a little bit of exploration. But we were looking at small towns in Tennessee, the Carolinas, Alabama, North Georgia, and just looking around, because we realized one of these learnings is we like smaller places. And so when something isn't working, when your vision isn't working out like you want it to, and you've accepted that, and you're ready to go back to the drawing board and make a change and go, all right, what do I want to do now? What's the new vision? Make sure that you have some takeaways. Make sure that you write down your learnings, and so that you can make a better decision in your new vision.
Yeah. Just a side note right here. I think the other thing is, for us, it's been important at this phase to go, all right, let's slow down.
Yes.
Things have been real elevated.
Yeah.
So let's slow it down and let things come back to homeostasis before we're making big decisions. So even now we're back in Alabama, but we're in the RV.
Yep.
And we're just kind of chilling and hanging out.
Our building has been on the market for a few months now.
Yeah.
It's taken its sweet, sweet time to sell. And we could try to do crazy stuff and move mountains and try and buy something here while we're not doing we could try to
and we're
muscle through this.
We have talked about it, and we've come to this place where we're no, we just need to hang out in the camper.
That's right.
And just be content with.
We need to have a small, slower season while we figure out kind of what's next, and while we wait for things to happen. And so we've kind of committed to just living back in the RV. We're leasing this office space here until the building sells. And then when it sells, then we'll go from there.
So our fifth lesson, we're getting like meta lesson here, because the fifth lesson is that it's important to learn the right lesson.
Yeah. I first heard this from Sean Purry on My First Million, and he talked about it because he was at a business dinner and some guy was telling him about this old business venture he had and then the lesson that he learned from it. And I forget the exact context. And Sean was like, he was like, I didn't say this to the guy, but I was like thinking in my head,
I think you learned the right
I don't think that's the right lesson to learn from that.
Okay, well, this ties back in with what I just said, because I think a big part of this is slowing down long enough to be able to get the right lesson out of it. Because, buddy, in the midst of a lot of this stuff, I would have given you very different lessons. You know, I mean, like, it would have been really easy to, like, be like, life vision.
Visioning is completely
it never works.
Garbage, because you just vision and then just things happen. And then now
you spend all this time writing something down and then it just blows up.
So that's just useless. We should just never vision again. Yeah.
And it's like, no. But you do need to vision in the correct way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think of like Hermosi has this bit about learning the right lesson where he says, if you learn the wrong lesson, it's like you go on a bad date. And then from that point forward, you just swear off dating of any kind. You're like, that's it.
I'm spending the rest of my life
single. I'm just going to be single now because I went on this bad date.
Which, I mean, like, we like literally say things like that joking, you know? I mean, you hear people say that. But oftentimes, that's the type of
the way you'll live.
That
and it's like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
That's the wrong lesson.
Totally.
Well, I think about, like, it would be very easy for us to go, real estate is stupid. And we should just never buy real estate. I'm never buying a house. I'm never going to buy a rental property. I'm never going to buy any sort of investment because look what happens. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have a whole podcast about, again, our financial and real estate learnings. But
because we are thinking about real estate very differently
than we did.
But we're not saying never, ever, ever again.
That would be the wrong lesson.
Yeah. I wanted to pull out just Reagan Rose and redeeming productivity. Because I think he just does a great job of talking about, he's got a video about like 5-year plans. Can I link to that in the description?
Yeah, you should be able to. Yeah.
So I'll put a link down to that because he just does a good job of talking about how, like, you know, we should make our plans, like, you know, come up with a vision for your life and then invite God to like redirect us as needed. And I think that's so true. And I mean, we've just experienced that. So I think when you vision and also hold it loosely, like that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think to loop this all the way back to the beginning of this podcast, right? Like the Teddy Roosevelt quote of being the man in the arena, the way that you ultimately fail is if you get in the arena and you get knocked down and then you go, well, that's it. I quit.
I'm out.
And you walk back up and you sit in the stands with the rest of the critics and you don't get back in the arena.
Yeah.
And so I think like ultimately we can't let the sort of, I don't even like using the word failure, but let's just say let the fact that our vision for the last 3 years didn't go the way we wanted it to go. We can't let that stop us from going, okay, well, we're going to keep visioning and we're going to keep planning and we're going to keep trying and we're going to keep pushing and we're going to get back in the arena.
Yeah.
You know?
I think about like, you know, like boxers and they like go over to the side and they like bandage them up or whatever.
That's exactly it.
Okay, get back in there.
Get back in there. Get back in there. Get back in there. That's exactly it. That's what we're doing. So we're getting back in there.
That is what it feels like.
So we're going to have some more episodes about all of our learnings. Like we said, we're going to talk about the financial and real estate learnings from the last few years and this investment and everything. If that's interesting to you, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Also, if you want to work on your own foundational beliefs and your priorities, be sure to click the link down below and grab that PDF worksheet for yourself. Thanks so much for watching and listening. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.